Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is March 29th, 2021, and we've got Jared Murphy with us. Jared, how are you?
Great. How you doing?
Not too bad, man. You enjoy the weekend?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
You know, we had a tornado go through my neighborhood yesterday afternoon, about 6 o'clock.
Not fun?
No, it was awesome. It was awesome, man. It was awesome. I was out on the deck, and man, it really got nuts, and I actually had to go inside because hail started flying all around. You know, stuff was flying all around. Trees were coming down. It was exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I mean, we're fine. Everything's fine. I guess we never even lost power. It was all on, because all our electricity is underground, I suppose. Just went through the neighborhood, tore up some, I guess those ceiling or roof shingles, and tore some trees down in the neighborhood, and threw a whole bunch of trash around. But other than that, everybody's okay and everything's fine. But boy, it was exciting.
Oh, that's nice to hear that everybody made it just fine. That's the rough one, isn't it?
Yeah, I love watching thunderstorms. I love it. I'll sit out on my deck, my porch, whatever, and I'll watch these storms come in, and it's just fascinating. And I knew this was going to be a good one, so I was sitting out there watching it, and I had to bail in the house. I don't have to do that very often.
Oh, no, we that's a big thing where I grew up, was watching the storms until one time a tornado came through town and literally ripped off garages from the people that were sitting in them. It was that bad. The tornado came down unexpectedly. Nobody got the warning in time, and nobody died, but a couple people got injured, and then they were fine ultimately, but it tore up the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, we lost a lot of trees. Some huge weeping willows around the lake in my community went down. And,
that sucks.
I mean, old weeping willows, big, huge weeping willows, just like 5 of them gone. It's just amazing. All right, so today on the show, we're going to have Creepy Little Book.
Pete.
Yeah, Pete. Well, his name's Peter, but I guess he likes being called Pete. Only his wife and mother call him Peter, so we'll call him Pete. And he has a YouTube channel called Creepy Little Book. I recommend everybody get over there and check it out. This is a fascinating channel, and we're actually doing a show. I wanted to talk to him about the Ark of Gabriel, and I found this channel researching the Ark of Gabriel and reached out to him right away to get him on. So we got him on today, and basically, Creepy Little Book is an alternative education highlighting hidden histories, NWO conspiracy theories, end times prophecy, UFOs, and occult forces. He creates content presented with bias and researched with due difference. So get over there and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. And Jared, we'll be right back with Pete right after this. Well, welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Peter from Creepy Little Book with us. Pete, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome to have you on. And just so everybody knows, Jared is also still with us. Jared, how are you?
Great. Doing awesome.
All right. Awesome. And Pete, the reason why I wanted to get you on today, we had Brad Olson on, and he briefly mentioned the Ark of Gabriel. And I found that fascinating, and I started scouring the internet for anything that had to do with Ark of Gabriel, and I was remarkably surprised by how little information there is out there, though it did lead me to your channel. It's awesome, Creepy Little Book. And, it's a fascinating channel, all types of stuff on here. People should definitely go over and check it out. The link will be in the description below. Before we get into the Ark of Gabriel, why don't you tell us, what is the Creepy Little Book, and how did you get it started?
Well, the Creepy Little Book was a product of my kind of natural progression of needing to feel creative. I was a musician for many years, and when that ended, I dabbled a bit in podcasting. I then reconnected with an old friend who lived out on the West Coast who had plans to move back east, and we had designs on putting together a YouTube channel. So I spent a year just doing hardcore research for the YouTube channel, waiting for him to move back. Once he did, we bought a camera and started making content, churning out videos, spending a lot of time together just making, content for the purpose of educating people on the world of the weird. After some time, the workload became a little heavier than my partner had expected it to be. So he kind of walked away from the project. And out of that, I decided that I needed to go solo and thus created the Creepy Little Book. Many people ask what the Creepy Little Book is named after most precisely because it's such an odd name. It actually is a leather-bound notebook that I carry on my person at all times. The phrase Creepy Little Book was coined by an old coworker of mine back when I was doing a stint as a bartender. A friend of mine who had gotten me the job, he was a chef. And he leaned over the bar and he saw me taking a note in my little book. And he said, "You better not be writing about me in your creepy little book." So when it came time to name the channel, that was the first name that came to mind.
It really is a fascinating channel. All types of stuff on there. And I'll just read a few of the descriptions here while everybody's listening. Gnomes, dragon legends, amazing mental powers. You talk about Frogman and Black-Eyed Kids, UFOs, cryptids, Jersey Devil, the Hollow Moon. I mean, all kinds of stuff here. It's just really a fascinating channel, man. I really suggest everybody that's listening go over and check out Creepy Little Book.
Thank you. Yeah, I never wanted to be held down to one topic. There's so much out there that's strange in the world. I wanted to address all of it and just be able to attack it from different angles and try to provide a really balanced, succinct presentation for people to then make up their own minds. I generally make two kinds of videos on this channel: a short informational type that's great, digestible bits of information for you to get a gist of a topic. And then I do my live streams every night, and they're an hour-long kind of conversation about whatever the given topic may be.
And every night you do a live stream?
Every night, including holidays and weekends.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I mean, that's a lot of work, man. I don't even want to think about what it would take for us to go every night. That'd be crazy, huh, Jared?
Yeah, divorce and separation.
Yeah, probably. So let's get into the subject at hand. I want to talk about the Ark of Gabriel. Growing up as a kid, obviously we all saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. I've been fascinated with the Ark of the Covenant, and I'd never even heard of the idea that there was another one out there. Can you tell us about it? How did you learn about it?
I first heard about it when all the Antarctica stuff started popping off back in 2016. So back in 2016, there was a lot of news out there buzzing around about the South Pole. Buzz Aldrin was down there. He got sick. He needed to be airlifted out. John Kerry went down there, highest-ranking U.S. official to visit the continent. There was a tweet, allegedly, of a pyramid that was discovered in Antarctica that was circulating. Now, that tweet has been since debunked, but it did add to the air of mystery that was going on down there. Now, this Ark of Gabriel story kind of comes out of this mythology that's been built up from, I don't know where it originates. One could say it may come from Saudi Arabia, it may come from Russia, but essentially how this story goes is there was some excavation work, some repair work being done underneath the Kaaba at Mecca, which is the holiest site in all of Islam. Mm-hmm. During this work, they discovered the Ark of Gabriel. And upon touching it, I think it killed something like 11 people. This incident, they said, this disaster that it caused, I think they explained away with a crane collapse.
Yeah, and a stampede.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of how they explained it away. But this was the actual destruction was caused by the unleashing the violent power of the Ark of Gabriel. And the question was, for me, did such an item ever exist? We don't hear anything about it in Scripture at all. It's just not there. So that set me off on a quest to find if such a thing existed. And my research on that Ark of Gabriel video took the better part of a year to try to track down the different threads and leads that kind of got me to the point where I could confidently say that such a thing, yes, indeed, did exist and was historically legitimate piece of history. Now, where it is now, I don't know. According to the legend, it was taken to the depths of Antarctica.
Yeah, did the Russians come and get it or something? Like
Yeah, so they discover in Saudi Arabia. Then a Russian ship comes to get it. This Russian ship comes to get it in Saudi Arabia. Then it makes a stop in South Africa before leaving for Antarctica. There's also the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kirill, who went to Antarctica himself. This was after meeting with the Pope. For the first time in 1,000 years, these two men's offices haven't met. The Roman pontiff has not met the Russian patriarch in over 1,000 years. But they met, and the story goes that the Pope bestowed upon the patriarch a spell or a prayer or a scroll of some type that was related to this Ark of Gabriel object.
all right.
So the speculation was that the object needed to be brought to Antarctica, to a church, where a ritual would be performed over it, and then it was taken deep into the interior of the continent to disappear forever. Who knows? Because that's kind of where the trail runs cold on the Ark of Gabriel. But I wanted to find it in the past. I needed to find references to it historically to prove that it existed, to say, hey, if there's any salt to this story, we need to find out if the thing ever was real. Was it ever mentioned?
So was it?
It was. I wanted to find a place where these religions all met in the ancient world. Where is one place where Christianity, Islam, and Judaism collided in the ancient world? Ethiopia. Ethiopia was a place of humongous Christian kingdoms in the ancient world. Aksum was the city I was looking particularly at. And Aksum was a great Christian kingdom in Ethiopia. I always tell people, if you are interested in some really strange Christian history, look into the battles that were fought over the city of Aksum by the different factions that wanted to wipe out the kingdom, and how history went down around Aksum. I just think it's a fascinating aspect of history. The city had been sacked and burned and attacked over and over again, and I think it was during one of these attacks, specifically by a beta Israeli queen, who I believe her epithet was the fire starter, if I'm not mistaken, because she just burned everything. That was her greatest war tactic, was scorched earth. So I think it was during one of these attacks that the Ark of Gabriel was secreted away to a set of small islands. And it was hid there for a while before it was eventually uncovered. And I think it was carried back to Mecca in some siege at some point in history. I can't pinpoint exactly when, but there is mention of this thing existing. There was mention of a church that housed it. And if it did exist, if it was real, we will find it. The last time we will find it is in the 9th century. That's when we'll see the last remarks of it.
All right. So was it mentioned at all in the Bible or the Quran or any of these other ancient texts?
It is mentioned in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Now, this is the same Bible that retains the Book of Enoch and other pseudepigraphal works and apocryphal editions that are not contained in other Bibles. The Ethiopian Orthodox Christians are some of the oldest Christians on earth. And one could say that perhaps that there is a lot of credence one could give to their scriptures based on the age of how long they've retained these beliefs.
So do you think that, I mean, obviously the Ark of Gabriel, is it like exactly like the Ark of the Covenant?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you if they're a duplicate of one or the other. My understanding is that the Ark of Gabriel was connected to Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. Whereas the Ark of the Covenant is, famously associated with the exodus of the Israelite people from Egypt. But the Ark of Gabriel doesn't seem to be that case. They're not the same item. They're not. They're definitely two different things. But the Ark of Gabriel is associated with Islam.
All right. So
100%. So that's where that comes from.
why do they call it the Ark of Gabriel? What's Gabriel?
Because
got to do
Gabriel
with it?
appeared to Muhammad and I think bestowed the Ark upon him.
Okay.
What it contained, I'm not aware.
Yeah, you got to wonder what's in it. You know, Jared, we were talking to Scott Walter, and he says that the Ark of the Covenant is pretty much a power source, right?
Yeah, that's, I think, the general theory with everybody is that it's, back to Von Daniken even, it's just a piece of high-tech ancient technology that got, misused, or, they picked it up and they're like, oh, it's hot to touch it. And then, gets in a box. And so I think what's consistent about all the stories is that they all end up in some sort of an ark. They've all been recovered, whatever they were. They weren't needed by or they weren't used by whatever advanced society left them around, and they got boxed up and around and used. And I mean, the Ethiopian story is pretty interesting because that's exactly the story. A lot of people don't know that's the story that Graham Hancock tells about what got him into doing this alternative research. Was he was looking for the Ark, and he ends up in Ethiopia. That was the catalyst for him becoming a researcher in all this. He was just a journalist, and then there were these guards that guarded what was supposed to be the last location of the Ark of the Covenant, and they keep dying of radiation poisoning. These guards that are left at this chapel that allegedly contains it, and then from there, we have the Ethiopian Bible being the only Christian Bible that still has the Book of Enoch in it. I mean, everybody else took it out. Why? What are you guys hiding? And then the Ethiopians still keep it in, and so I think a lot of things get lost in mystification, and then a lot of things, like what Pete's saying, it converges on Ethiopia. It's such a central location, and on top of it, it just has such an odd. A lot of people don't think much about the megaliths in that area and throughout Africa that don't include the Great Pyramids. And there is like the Nubian pyramids, there's such a significant amount. There's henges bigger than Stonehenge in Liberia and across. There's just a significant level of ancient high technology, abandoned sites or repurposed, readapted. And then, we got Scott Walter talking also about, you and I had done that interview with the Moon-Eyed people and the Cherokee Moon-Eyed people. And then they start referencing, we start hearing references about the Ark being in, the Ark of the Covenant being in Arizona, or being a part of something as far west as Montana via the Templars or something. So the story gets interesting, but coming full circle back to the John Kerry, the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, Buzz Aldrin, all these people going down to, I mean, come on, man.
There's something going on down there around that point in history. I really think that there was something to the story, because there's just too much buzz about it. There was too much happening in Antarctica all around the same time for there not to be some kind of element of truth to this whole sordid ordeal.
Yeah, there's just, and that's what's so frustrating. And we have these conversations with a lot of people that we do a lot of interviews with. I mean, it's fun to, like, I'm a researcher, and talking to Christopher Dunn and Mohammed Ibrahim, and talking to Michael Cremo, and there's so many people that have done so much work over the years, and you do the work. And the reality is that people want to know these absolute answers, and it's so, we don't have that clearance level. And I am willing to give up my general pursuit to bring information to people if you just want to put me in the club.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff, really. Jared, when you were researching for your book, did you come up, I guess, did you do any research on that city he was talking about? Was it Nexium?
Aksum.
Is this an Antarctica city or the Himalayan version?
The
No,
Ethiopian.
Axum is in Ethiopia.
Oh, okay. So no, like this is no. You'll have to tell me more about it.
Axum was there was an Aksumite Empire and the Ethiopian Church, and they had a population of about 70,000 people, I think, back at this time period. They were a trading and naval power that ruled the region from 400 BC into the 10th century. So a huge power from 400 BC into the 10th century, an Aksumite Empire, a naval and trading power. But they were Christian. They were Christian. They converted to Christianity, and under the reign of Emperor Caleb, they were a quasi-ally of Byzantium against the Sasanian Empire, which adopted Zoroastrianism.
So how far back is this?
The Ark of Gabriel stuff goes back to the 9th century. So right before the end of their empire. That's why I think we see the Ark disappear when it does.
Do you think they had both Arks there at one time?
Very well could have been. Very well could have been.
You know, it makes you wonder if there were two Arks, if there aren't more. Have you heard?
You almost wonder if there was a third, kind of fill out that trinity.
Yeah. Have we had any mention of any others?
None that I could think of. I mean, I could think of different deities from the ancient past that could perhaps be associated with one, but it's really such a unique concept in religion. You don't see a lot of parallels to it.
Go ahead, Jerry.
No, I just don't. We have the Hindu Vedas and the weapons of the gods and the stories that go back millions of years versus thousands of years, and the problem with our post-flood, mythologies or religions, or all of them, separate verticals here, but you got the Old Testament strictly borrowing or coincidentally coming up with the identical creation stories and Noah flood myths and the same. Even the Gilgamesh stories they can't even give those up. They're so epic, literally. They translate those into the Old Testament. And then I think where a lot of research gets lost is when you take the word of the scripture versus the source material. Is it J source? Is it Q source? Is it 2 source? Is it the Yahwehist, the Elohist? You have to look at the scraps to say, okay, well, they chose to incorporate this or that. And when you look at the original, you have to go back to the most original convoluted scraps of every story to say, well, these 6 pieces of paper equal this chapter or this paragraph or these 2 pages. You can't read the Bible and say, here's a complete authentic story when you have Gregorian monks going, well, this shouldn't have said this, it should have said that. And I, sir, blah, 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 or, monk so-and-so, friar, this, that, fix this, and they date it. And then miraculously, it's amazing how many times we've burned old libraries. And it's like, we wrote the new versions and burned the old versions. So, there's too many examples of the scripture itself. It's difficult. I grew up Irish Catholic. So if I say scripture, it naturally rolls off the tongue that there's a book of doctrine that was Holy Spirit inspired and it's never been tampered with, and everything in it is as it should be when it came from Simon and Schuster in the last copy I got. And, so there's a real distortion for people that is almost it's just stronger than titanium. There's no breaking people's paradigms on these stories. So we relate to a find or a artifact from the stories of which even in modern times has been so changed, even with the King James Bible. I mean, you could say, well, they only tweaked it for the divine right of kings. And it's like, well, again, we're not looking at original linguistics. We're not looking at original origin stories. We're not taking into account all the, contemporary stories of the period that other than the ones we know of. And so you put it all together, and yet again, we have a sliver of the truth. And it appears that we have two high technology items that, we don't know what to do with them. But they showed up and they got deified or mystified. And I think it's very telling, at least a little bit, about the special clothes you have to put on to handle the ark. And it's not the ritual. It sounds like you're throwing on a radiation suit, and you probably put some really pretty embroidery on it,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotta have all your symbols, right?
You have this idea where, you only had specific Levite priests who could carry the ark. The ark had to be carried by two poles. You couldn't touch the ark. The ark was covered in animal skins. You couldn't look at the ark.
So now what? What's with these? I mean, again, I do find it interesting that Graham Hancock goes to find the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia, traces it there, and then comes across these guards that won't let anybody into this special location that is supposed to be the Ark of the Covenant. And frequently those guards, they're appointed for life. They have kids. Those kids are supposed to take over the spot. And everyone who's a guard appears to die of radiation poisoning. It's a pretty odd thing. And I find it interesting that no one's broken their, I know it'd be sacrilegious, but I'm really surprised that we don't have photos or any further updates from that location.
Well, do you think though, Jared, that there's, I mean, obviously we hear all the stories about, the army that possesses the ark is going to have all kinds of great power. Why hasn't, if that's where people think it is, why hasn't there been an army to go in there and steal the damn thing yet?
Speculation wise, it's either not in there or something else is in there, and it's not something that anybody can use, and it's not something that reveals too much truth. So let sleeping dogs lie is all I can think. Because if it was something significant, I feel like it would have easily been removed and replaced with something, similar, or, a little Indiana Jones switch out, but with a more accurate replica right down to the radiation sickness.
What do you think, Pete? You think the ark's in there?
Well, I mean, there was the guy named Ron Wyatt, right? And he claimed he found the ark. He claimed he found the ark in Jeremiah's grotto, which was under the place of the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And according to Ron Wyatt, at the crucifixion, when Christ died and the rocks are rent apart, this crack in the rock opens up underneath the site of the cross so that Christ's blood can trickle down the cross into the post hole, down through the crack in the rock, and drip onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, which is directly underneath the place of the crucifixion, according to Ron Wyatt, who said he discovered it in the early 80s. And there are people who absolutely believe that this is the case, and that there is a cave in Israel where the Ark is currently residing, and that it can't be moved until there's a new temple to put it in.
Let's back up so he
that's and I've heard that story.
This is his story. So he found it, and he dug it up.
He dug it up. He dug a hole down into a cave, and found the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, Jared. I think the way it worked was the part of the temple that the Ark was under was actually at the time was occupied by it was different land, like it was Palestinian land or something. So it wasn't, he wasn't even supposed to be there because it was like not even Israel land, I don't think, like the beginning of the cave was, but then when the cave actually went under, the land wasn't Israel's or something like that. Am I right, Pete? Wasn't it something like that?
I thought for some reason it was like a trash heap at the time.
Yeah, well, there's so many stories.
And well, see, there's a lot of debate on that. So, I mean, none of us are going to be absolutely accurate on what happened.
When did he do it?
Oh, in the 80s. It was like 1982, 84, something like that.
And he didn't snap a photo?
I think there are photos of it. I think they're not the greatest photos you've ever seen, but I think there are supposed to be photos of it.
Yeah, they look a lot like every UFO photo ever.
Well, so he finds it, and then what happened after he finds it?
Well, he was also the guy who claimed to find the Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. So, like, his whole thing was like, look, I'm an archaeologist who discovers biblical things. That was his whole shtick.
Okay.
But in his case, I think they kept the location hidden because the temple needs to be built before they can move it back into the temple.
A temple needs to be built. Wait, so who's allegedly in possession of it now?
Okay, it is still buried where Ron Wyatt found it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's just not giving up the location until, I guess the Dome of the Rock has to be torn down and then the temple rebuilt where the Dome of the Rock is, right, Pete?
I don't know if they got to take one down to do the other. I would sincerely love to see them find a way to do both. But, I mean, some believe one has to come down before the other can go up.
So what was it? Give me the thing again about the blood in the Ark lid. Is that the deal?
Yeah. The blood of Christ. When the crucifixion, the culmination of the crucifixion, when Christ dies, there's an earthquake. The sky goes dark. The dead come up out of their tombs. But the earthquake cracks the rocks, and the rock below the cross cracks, so that Christ's blood can flow down it and drip onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, which was buried underneath the site of the crucifixion.
So did they purposely crucify him on top of the Ark?
They didn't know that it was there.
So it was just coincidence.
Divine providence, one would say.
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, and this is his theory from the 80s, right?
Right. He went to the Middle East hundreds of times from like the 70s to the 90s when he died. But like he was neither a professional archaeologist nor a biblical scholar.
I just like the fact that for once, I like to point out to people, if you feel like the entire story of somebody giving you about if it sounds like the plot to Stargate or Deep Space Nine or Babylon 5, then you're probably getting the plot to those movies. In this case, I now know the origin of underworlds blooding into the metal diagram in the floor to feed the sleeping vampires as they're jumping through time. This is perfect. I love this.
Well, there's all kinds of stories. I mean, Scott Walter was on our show not too long ago, and he said that the Templars had found the Ark when they found John the Baptist's head, right?
Yeah, so there's a thing. It's the Masonic tradition, and he writes about this in his latest book. Is that it's very clear in Masonic tradition that Jesus never died on the cross. He was married to Mary Magdalene. They find John the Baptist was with Mary Magdalene prior. They had a kid. Then Mary was with Jesus. Jesus did not die on the cross, and that's just something the Catholic Church perpetuates. But the reality is Jesus did not die on the cross, and there's some other theories on that too. Some say Jesus lived out his life, and there's even that Ancient Alien episode that ends with there's a whole city in Japan that they have a burial. They have a whole thing for Christ that allegedly he lived past his 90s and died in Japan.
Who died in Japan? Jesus?
Jesus. Yeah, no, they have a grave for him. They have the whole town knows. He was there for a really long time.
Really? They have a grave in Japan for Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a whole nother show right there I'm going to have to get into.
Then the whole Jesus in India thing, you have that too.
Oh, yeah. Well, so yeah, do you think he went there? So there's that whole like, where did Jesus go for his missing ears? And there's records in Tibet and there's records in India that he had traveled to that area to learn a lot of what was preached later. But I don't, do you think he ended up there again after the crucifixion? Jesse James style.
Well, what do you think, Pete?
I'm not sure.
Boy, you gotta love the stories, right? There's so many stories. Let's just take let's just stop on that for a minute. Let's just say the Ark of the Covenant is real, and the Ark of Gabriel is real, and there's possibly more out there. Do you think, Pete, that they came down from God, like God and the angels actually gave us these things, or do you think it's possible that it's just remnants of an old advanced civilization?
I think that's really a matter of faith. I think that comes down to each and every individual person's kind of concept of how divinity and creation and all the existence comes together. With something like these arks, if we're going to talk about multiple ones, then we need sources for them. Now, the source for the Ark of Gabriel is Gabriel's instructions to Muhammad, a manuscript from like 1204 the Eastern Orthodox Church had. These were supposedly a message that Muhammad was given near the Holy City in a cave by Gabriel, talking of a box that held tremendous power and belonged only to God. And it was forbidden to use this thing until Resurrection Day. Until then, it was buried under the place of worship of angels before the creation of man. So that's where we got, that comes from the Hagia Sophia. That's where that thing was hidden away at. So since 1204, this manuscript was hidden away in the Hagia Sophia, talking about Gabriel's instructions to Muhammad regarding this Ark of Gabriel.
So did he give him the Ark of Gabriel, or did he give him instructions on how to build one?
Maybe instructions on how to hide one or how to use it. The instructions could have been there how to build it. We don't know exactly what the instructions say.
Yeah.
This could have been a document that was given between the Pope and the Patriarch, for all we know.
What do you think, Jared?
I have a fascination with stories like this because they are period. They are dynastic. We're very far away from, I think, the ancient, what I talk about in my book, It's Not Aliens, Worse, It's Us, Discovering a Lost History, which is highly advanced human society was here through natural and or disagreements. That society falls apart. It was global. It is no longer global. And scraps of whatever was left of their technology ends up here for what now after post-Younger Dryas and the assorted wanderings of the planet left on its own, as people who survived for, overtake what later becomes dynastic Egypt and the Greeks and the Incas and Aztecs and the Harappan and what we find the ancient megaliths in Japan. And again, water levels are very different from where they were pre-Younger Dryas or, even 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. Doggerland, Europe, it looked very different. So we have a very primitive view of all these technologies, and we have a very, we have a different scale and scope of motivation and power grab to control the world here in our level of understanding. So when these stories come up and they come up within these later religions, they're great. A lot of times they're great markers for geology or for archaeological finds for there really is a city here. They talk about it here and it's between these two other cities and they find those cities. And I think geographically stories like this are good for that. But then I do think there's something to the mythologies, all the slivers in all religions of truth. We used to talk with animals, the common flood theme, the longevity of life that why is it constant that at some point we either lived indefinitely or for extremely longer periods? That seems to be similar. And then we got these stories of artifacts that have been deified like this, and they're like, I have totally, it's all very serious stuff. Part of my mind goes to Monty Python and throwing the holy hand grenade, though.
Yeah. Well, you got to wonder if Gabriel gave Muhammad these instructions in a cave, maybe it's possible Muhammad went in the cave and just happened to, run into some ancient Earth civilization that's been living underground, right? I mean, that's possible. Maybe Gabriel is just, one of the, ancient civilization, it's not aliens, it's us theory, right?
Like ultra-terrestrials, if you will.
Yeah.
These things that are of Earth but are not human. And I kind of get the idea you mean the Vril when you're talking about Gabriel in this sense, that maybe he encounters a Vril in a cave, and maybe this is some kind of Vril technology we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I was just going to say there are more wild theories out there, so you could tie a lot of that together.
Yeah, mine is that it's more likely, it's been easier for us to come up with the 100th monkey theory, collective human consciousness, which is a real thing, but the idea of explaining worldwide pyramid building, worldwide polygonal construction, the easier jump, it was easier to believe that, well, clearly if we're the most advanced as we've ever been, clearly there's some missing brilliant primitive technique that we use to build the pyramids and other things. There's these brilliant but primitive fill in the blank. And it is really difficult for people, I think, to get their head around the idea that an advanced human society did everything from create something called terra preta, which is an ancient engineered soil, which I talk about a lot in my book, that the earth is covered in a lot of engineered soil, which most people go, fascinating, but not sexy. Well, there's a problem. If you have a piezoelectric, electrically conductive, heavy metal, carbon filtering, most nutritious soil on Earth that also self-replicates, it's thousands of years old at a minimum, and it's all over places that it's not supposed to be. That is a problem to, again, the paradigm for the humanities. And when you add up and table just the facts of finds, paleoanthropological finds of modern anatomically correct humans that date back 5, 10, 20, 60 million years, and I think it tells a story that humanity's been here a really long time, and its ability, based on remnants of math, maps, Mercator projections, maps of sea kings. My whole book, just to sum it up for you quick, is, in my conclusion, when you see what you think is a reptilian or a guy with white skin, he's kind of short, has big black eyes, we make an assumption as we design babies today that an advanced human race would choose or continue to appear human. I go for Rick and Morty style and say, Morty, quick, put on these antenna. You need to look alien to the battery universe inside my car. So when we encounter what is likely an ancient human race, they're not going to pop up and go, yeah, we look just like you because we're you, but we don't really want to take care of you. And we kind of screwed things up, and we gave your religion a couple times, and we interfered a few times, and we taught you how to build things again. Remember that Viracocha thing in South America? Yeah, that was us. That was kind of our Peace Corps for a while. And well, anyway, we're here. We've always been here. We kind of left you on the surface a few thousand years ago because, great-great-grandma shut the door on the bunker, but we're sorry. So instead, if you show up, you don't have to admit that you're human. You don't even have to appear human. The assumption is that they're from somewhere else. And it's not that there aren't interdimensions or other universes or anything else. I just think that when you look at all the significant levels of technology found all around the planet, that it points more towards these highly advanced, highly maneuvering Tic Tacs and assorted other non-military UFOs as being likely part of that remnant human race that with impunity can come and go and avoid us as they please, or bag us and tag us and experiment with us as they continue to sort things out for themselves. But that's the short.
Yeah,
that's
you talk about ancient advanced humans. They don't have to be human, do they? I mean, they could be a totally different species.
Well,
Well, are you guys familiar with the Prism of Lyra?
that sounds interesting.
So the Prism of Lyra.
It's not a Scientology thing, is it?
No, but it is a grand space opera. It was written by Alyssa Royale. And I forget who the other guy was. Let me see. The Prism of Lyra was Alyssa Royale and Keith Priest. And it tells the story of the Orion Wars that take place millions of years ago in the Orion constellation. And a race of cat people from Lyra who come from the fertile crescent of the galaxy, rather. So all life in our universe starts in this fertile crescent in Lyra. And humans are from there who came to Earth in the past and colonized here millions and millions of years ago and then left. There were other aliens that came here as well in the ancient past. But this talks about a great war that happened and it lasted for millions of years out in the Orion constellation between Orions, reptilians, and this rebel alliance that fought to a standstill until the war was finally ended. But they say that there's still some places out there in the galaxy where this conflict has not been resolved yet. So the Prism of Lyra is a really interesting book about the human galactic heritage. And it talks about the collective humanoid consciousness created in our universe and for what purpose.
Well, that Israeli guy was just talking about the Galactic Federation, right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And I mean, between that and 180 days to disclosure, it was that coming up in June, I believe.
Yeah, June 1st, I think.
So we are getting to a point where I think there's going to be a lot of information coming out.
It's a great awakening, right? It's time for the great awakening, I suppose. What do you think, Jared? I mean, you don't rule out that. I mean, we can't be. I mean, even if the aliens that we think are aliens are really us, you can't rule out that there's advanced civilizations from other planets that are possibly flying around the solar system and the galaxy, right?
No, you can't roll it out. There's that is a possibility. And when somebody, it's completely possible, but unless we have contact that somebody can actually, hey, I am from here. I'm willing to stop long enough to explain it or chat about it or fill in the blank. That'd be one thing. But when somebody writes about it and, okay, so there was this great, I mean, who is your galactic historian giving you the rundown on this and what documents are you using to even come up with this? That's my only question.
This is channeled information here. It's all channeled.
Oh, shoot. All right. That's what I figured. You can't argue with the Holy Spirit. Yeah. You can't. Checkmate on me.
Yeah, these people they are channeling space aliens to come up with this galactic information. So I always say take channeled stuff with a grain of salt because it's nonsense. Like at the end of the day, who can really sort out who's actually channeling real space aliens and who's coming up with nonsense? We can go all the way back to George Van Tassel, and that's where Ashtar Galactic Command comes from, is his channeled information. So this is a natural extension of the mediumship of the 1880s and the 1920s. You have people who become UFO contactees of the 1950s and 60s, vastly different from the abductees of the 80s and 90s who would go on to have these negative experiences. You had people who were encountering our space brothers, and there's so many different case files of people like Truman Bethram who were running into humanoid aliens that were benevolent. And he was in love with their space commander, Captain Aura Raines. I think it ruined his marriage because he was in love with the beautiful space captain. Who else was there? Elizabeth Clare.
That sounded familiar.
Yeah, and there was Elizabeth Clare from South Africa who, at the age of 40-something, 48 or something like that, conceived a child with the space alien Akon and went back to his planet and gave birth there. They took her car and everything on the spaceship. She wrote a whole book about her love affair with the space alien Akon.
That's the plot to Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm pretty sure.
Well, this book was produced in the 80s.
See, all the way around then.
So
See, I'm getting source material here for the movies. This is great. I mean, it's the other way around.
So while we're on this subject, isn't it possible that the Russians kind of took the Ark of Gabriel? They possibly brought it to Antarctica so that they could enter the Hollow Earth right there and return the Ark back to, say, the Andromedans or the Palladians or however many different alien races that live in the Hollow Earth. I mean,
I still think we're dealing with humans in the Hollow Earth. Humans and, of course, the ascended masters of Theosophy. When you get in the Hollow Earth, you get into all the Agartha stuff. And once you start talking about Agartha, then we got to say who's in charge of the place. And it comes down to none other than Sanat Kumara, ascended master and king of the world.
Sanat Kumara? Who's that?
He is the ascended master of ascended masters. He is king of the world and regent of the planet Earth. And when things finally get bad enough on the surface, he and his army of light will ride out from the Hollow Earth and make things proper on the surface again.
Oh.
All right. So
did I say that out loud?
Could that also be Satan?
It could be if you're a Christian. If you're a Theosophist, it just makes sense.
Okay. All right. Well,
One could conflate it with Conqueror, the conquering horse of Revelation. I was just talking about Revelation 2 nights ago on my channel, and we talked about the first horse who comes wearing a crown and with a bow, and he's on a white horse, and he goes out conquering and to conquer. So maybe Sanat Kumara could be associated with this character.
So how do we know about Sanat Kumara?
Sanat Kumara comes from a rich tradition of Ascended Master teachings. Ascended Master teachings originate with the belief system of Theosophy that was cooked up by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and people like John Olcott. And they cook up the ideas of Theosophy by traveling through India and Tibet and places like this and becoming Buddhists. And they once they cook up the ideas of Theosophy, they spread it to millions of people in India. Like Blavatsky was famous. She was world renowned. Some people thought her a charlatan. Other people thought her a mystic, but she was world renowned. So she wrote a book called The Secret Doctrine, where she delves into Lemuria and the root races. Like all this stuff comes from her. But she also was getting automatic writing from ascended masters, from these people like Sanat Kumara. Another good example of ascended masters are you familiar with the Count of Saint Germain?
No.
He was the Wonder Man of Europe. He was an immortal who was well known on the courts of France and England and Russia in the age of the Victorians. And he was an alchemist who could turn diamonds into bigger diamonds. They said he created the Philosopher's Stone. They said that he never aged and that he didn't eat and that he didn't die. He knew Voltaire. He knew Casanova. They were rivals. He knew Marie Antoinette. He was the Count of Saint Germain, the Wonder Man of Europe. And now there's a whole religion based around him called Summit Lighthouse, which was founded by Elizabeth Clare Prophet back in the 70s. And they worship Saint Germain as one of these ascended masters of Theosophy. They call him the Violet Flame because he represents one of these kohans or rays of light that these different ascended masters represent. And to get back into the UFO thing briefly, Ashtar Galactic Command that we just talked about a second ago when I mentioned George Van Tassel, this is also tied into ascended master teachings because people believe that Ashtar of this ascended Galactic Command is also an ascended master, as is Jesus Sananda, another one of these ascended master characters.
So where are these? Where are these?
Afra? There's a whole pantheon of these characters.
So could they be the old advanced human society?
They at one time were humans. They've just ascended beyond.
Jared?
Yeah, I was trying to text you. I have terrible sound at this end. It sounds like you guys are underwater.
Oh, okay. Well, you
So
sound fine.
I can't. It's terrible. I mean, it's truly terrible. So could you guys pause and call me back?
All right, let's just take a break for a minute. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. Well, welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Jared back, and I guess the audio problems are fixed. So where were we?
Well, we had covered some galactic information.
Yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Again, you can't argue with anyone who's channeling stuff. And to me, the veil that I've been trying to lift personally is to get people to look at the facts that are in the ground and our different our hidden superhuman abilities. And the reality is that we are not as advanced as we were, and our timelines are off. So part of what happens is that when we rely on religions in the last couple thousand years, they don't handle anatomically correct humans in millions of years old layers of Earth, and we also don't have a large fossil, paleoanthropological, physical evidence left from millions of years ago. So those are all issues when you're trying to decide, hey, anyway, the point is that it's difficult. You can't say anything to anybody who says, well, I was told this in a dream. I was told this in a vision. It's like, you can't do anything with that. It's just frustrating because, and a story builds up around it. What's important is that you can have faith, or you can have everyone's, I think, a spiritual being. You need to have a spiritual center, but then it can't cloud your judgment when you are going through a layer of earth and going, oh, we don't need to dig further because we already know there's nothing below there, or we're not expecting to find that item. Isn't that odd? Isn't that a mystery? Isn't that impossible? Instead of looking at the obvious, which is, I mean, it's like it's a giant high-tech mess all over the planet. And so when we start adding these more current mythologies, it's these stories, it's like, gosh, it just confuses, I think, the real issue of what's up. But don't let me be a poopy pants on on some of these ideas.
Well, I mean, it's, every story has a grain of truth to it, doesn't it? Even if it's totally ridiculous.
Well, right. And the issue is that if you're talking about people that not only controlled frequencies and waves and energy, they, of course, also controlled genomes. I think there's a lot to be said about splicing, and a lot to be said of ancient cutting. The human genome does not look like it should. And the reality is that it's not just humans, it's in plants, it's in animals. And that society, either they got completely wiped out or they survived. And the reality is that they, we have these now remnant pieces of these ancient technologies that, they don't add up unless there was somebody here within a reasonable amount of time that in those slivers of truths, again, longevity of man, length of time that we lived, stories like Atlantis, does it really represent a single city, or does it represent a race of advanced humans? And it's the last time anybody lived near one of their colonies, where they moved offshore, they moved to a more remote location, they continued to do what they do. Because we have those lithographs from Nuremberg. We have clear evidence, we just interviewed Wallace Wagner. There are clear evidences of battles between higher level beings, but it's so much easier for us to get our heads around the idea that they're from somewhere else, because it's impossible for humans to have already advanced into technologies that would be beyond where we are now. But if you include genetic sciences and you include way beyond an F-18, the reality is that there's a good chance that they already did, because we have millions of years of paleoanthropological human history. So it's not about the odds, it's about the evidences based from polygonal construction to, again, engineered soil. My thought is still that it's us. And again, those segments or those fractions of those populations that made it through prior to the Younger Dryas, the super volcano, that whole thing that went down that Brad Olson was talking about, like in 75,000 years ago, that there was a series of catastrophes that really just put an end to a global population. And a lot of those evidences are underwater. And then we have these remnants of that era in the form of what we're identifying as UFOs, but we have so many mythos around it. I think we need to do a lot more digging in the ground. Yet I think it's super important to put eyes on all these stories, not to just that this just never happened. That's not the point. The point is there could be a sliver of truth. There could be a genetic memory. There could be something hidden within what somebody's seeing. They just might not understand what they're seeing. You know, my analogy, Pete, is to 1,000 years, people bang on the blinky board and it blinks orange on one side and red on the other. And they've done it for 1,000 years in a ritual. And someone comes along and says, why are you banging on the control panel of a 747? That's a plane. It flies. And of course, somebody yells heretic and burn him. And the reality is that you can use a super advanced technology and get a response out of it. And it's doing that same response because that screw loose is just loose enough to give you the response that you think is the way it is. And the reality is that it's not the correct use for that technology, but you've been worshiping and deifying the response out of the technology because that's the most you are capable of understanding it. There's no way for you to see it for what it is, that it is something else because you've been banging on the blinky board and or doing yoga over Chernobyl for 1,000 years. It's still a thing, but you're still not. You can wear, you know, a flowered headdress over Chernobyl and worship the summer solstice, and that's a thing. It's been a thing for a long time, but it's still Chernobyl. And it was a nuclear plant that melted down, and that's it. There was nothing special about it, but it was a nuclear plant. So if you want to grab giant lentil megalithic pillars, standing stones that represent megalithic remnants of a massively advanced culture that wasn't just dealing with stone, they were dealing with wood, they were dealing with other metals. And you know, we have the legends of Rome of bendable glass. Where the hell would they ever come up with that? You know, bendable glass. That was a Roman thing. And it's just, there's too many pieces, the Mercator lines, the Piri-Reis map, the projections, the Antarctica without ice on it, Doggerland. There's just too many things that point to more advanced humans. And because we keep seeing all these UFOs and because hopefully this dump coming, Michael Hall and I were talking, I hope this dump is just not a repeat of the CIA disclosures. What do you think? The ones that just, you know, the last stuff that came out, you know,
They're
are
not
they just
gonna
going to
tell us
repackage it?
Yeah, I don't
Do you
know.
think
There was
they're gonna
nothing really groundbreaking there.
Right. Do you think they're just going to repack? I'm not trying to be, I want the same thing. I'm frustrated with this. I don't want to like be the Debbie Downer in this three-way here.
You know, I don't think that they're going to release anything.
You don't?
No. I think, you know, I think it's just going to be, you know, more smoke and mirrors.
Huh. That's interesting. I wonder, you know, as far as if anything gets out, I think the misinformation is important. I think it's important that these stories are out there, that people are channeling stuff, that it's just really interesting that as long as they're not ready to really disclose anything, they're not going to say anything. So I think it's important.
Yeah. Pete, you have anything else to say on that?
Well, I'm hopeful about this disclosure. I mean, we'll see if anything comes of it. I think either we will get a substantial release or we'll get nothing at all. I think the chances also exist we'll get nothing at all. I mean, just because this has to be released doesn't mean it needs to be released to the public. And even if it is, it could be heavily redacted at the same time.
Yeah.
So best not to get our hopes too high.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Pete. Who are the ultra-terrestrials?
Okay, so ultra-terrestrials I equate with the Fae. So you've got your standard goblins, your leprechauns, your fairies, your elves, your, dwarves, gnomes, and other such creatures of folklore and mythology. These are the ultra-terrestrials. They, according to some, are angels who didn't pick a side during the revolt in heaven. So they were cast down to earth to become the Fae. There's a lot of legends about these kind of creatures in various mythologies, the Celtic, the Germanic, Scandinavian. You will find creatures like this replete throughout those cultures. But you'll even see some of these creatures appear in forms in Native American legends. And the first thing that comes to mind is the Pukwudgie, and that fits in right in with kind of brownies or kobolds or these other kind of mythological creatures. Now, it's really easy to dismiss these as mythological, but I mean, there are people who've had fairy encounters experience missing time very similar to UFO encounters. So this could be the work of ultra-terrestrials, which I also tie into. I mean, they're elementals. They're elemental spirits. They were never alive in the way that we think of things being alive.
Yeah, that's
or
kind of
perhaps they're not corporeal in a way that we think of things being corporeal. But they exist nonetheless. I've heard haunting cases where, you know, I've interviewed paranormal groups, and they have encountered actual leprechaun hauntings.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's hear about leprechaun hauntings.
So essentially, this guy thought he had leprechauns in a tree on his property, and he did. So he kept going out there with his camera trying to take pictures of these leprechauns. And the more he harassed this tree, the worse the poltergeist activity in his house kept getting because of these leprechauns. So they brought in a paranormal group, which consisted of ex-firefighters and policemen and a couple mediums. This was a local Pennsylvania-based paranormal group I had the opportunity to talk with. And they had done full recon and research and investigation of the site of the haunting, and they determined that he was dealing with leprechauns and that he needed to make them an offering of food and leave them the hell alone. So what he did is he stopped taking pictures of the tree himself. He just had a couple of his buddies come over and do it. So stuff in his house got worse again.
Oh, that's funny.
Because he tried to get around, you know, the leprechauns. But he ended up, they stopped working with him because they're like, obviously you don't want this haunting to go away, because if you did, you'd listen to us. And they eventually left him to his own devices. I think he had to move away from the property.
Those are, I mean, you hear stuff like this happening, and it's just very, very fascinating stuff like this, because it crosses that paranormal blinky board, genetic memory, you know, superhuman abilities, like how much of it is collective consciousness, and how much of it is him tapping into it unconsciously or consciously, how much of that is you know, a lightning rod towards his personal space and life. What is that? It's just interesting. It's there's no going around those kind of I don't know, those kind of stories are just fascinating. How long ago did that one happen?
Oh, that one was in, I want to say 2008.
Yeah, it sounds like the ultra-terrestrials are kind of what the Moon-eyed people would be, Jared.
Oh, they're from one of the Carolinas, aren't they? The Cherokee Moon-eyed people you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I recall the story of those guys. They kind of get associated with the mound builders to some degree.
Yeah. That we had a gal on that had done a story about them, and you know, well, she had researched and written them, and then after that, so there was basically a university that was digging into their tunnels. So they found tunnels. They didn't know what to do with the tunnels. They just basically kept building the university, and the tunnels got done in or covered up, and that was the end of it as far as the interactions with the Cherokee and them having their fight with the little people and them heading back into the ground or into a portal and disappearing. That was the end of that. And that was the end of that as far as our any extent or knowledge of secondhand accounts for those people. But that it's yet again, here we have little people all over the world. There's never, I just don't think it's a coincidence or it's oh yeah, we have little people too. I don't think it was some sort of ancient early social media. Oh, you have legends of little people. I don't think it's made up. There's some truth in it.
There's definitely something there. I mean, you think of the Celtic legend of the Tuatha De Danann, these like fairy kings. And they're like the size of people. They're not like little tiny winged things. They're like they look like people. They're human sized. They possess supernatural abilities. They live in a realm that is outside of our reality. They have their own unique world that they live in that is parallel to ours. There's a lot to it when it gets down to these elemental beings, these ultra-terrestrials, is what I refer to them as, because I mean they're from Earth. Their origin is here. They've been here as long as we have. So, I mean, there are the ultra-terrestrials. If we, talk about these extraterrestrials that come from far away, we have to acknowledge the ones that are here. And these too could have some connection to the inner Earth that we mentioned before, or to those ascended masters I was talking about. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, I mean, they did have tunnels, right?
And so did Lemurians, Telos, underneath the Mount Shasta.
Yeah, there's so much going on. I think there's so much going on. We really don't have any idea what's really happening. I mean, what can we even see? How much is going on that we can't even see because our eyes and brains just don't see it,
It's probably for the best.
Yeah, probably.
Could be Lovecraftian nightmares roaming down the street for all we know. Invisible to our eyes.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep people at the shopping malls.
Yeah. So, Jared, you have any questions for Pete?
Well, okay, so I know you have your show as far as whatever you are or are not currently about to publish or work on, but is there anything that you've been working on that you haven't put together a show on that you'd want to talk about or share that you find fascinating?
I've been working on something called the Hefferland Manuscript for quite a while now. It pertains to Antarctica. I'm just kind of biding my time on the video because I used to put on Antarctica videos and get like colossal views on them. So I'm waiting for the right time to drop this one, so that it does well and it's fully produced. And I'm trying to come at it from a different angle than I've made videos before. So it's a little bit different. I've recently been delving into some new techniques so that I can produce content again in a way that I haven't been able to in a while. When I started this channel, I was, a single guy without any kids. And now I've got two and a wife. And, it's been a wild ride, but it's time consuming, as I'm sure you guys are aware. So I used to be able to make these very short videos at least once, sometimes twice a week. But now I'm just heavily rely on live streaming to kind of keep the audience entertained. But recently I have been working on these two projects. Another one's Dorothy Eady. So the Hefferland Manuscript and Dorothy Eady, if you're familiar with her, she was a young girl who fell down the stairs and they thought she had died. And by the time the doctor got there, she was awake again and started talking about how she needed to go back and be with her people. Because after this head injury, she was convinced she was the reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian priestess. They used to take her to the museum. She would bow down and kiss the feet of Egyptian statues. She claimed to recognize places in pictures depicted on the wall. She started sneaking off to attend Catholic Mass because she said it was the closest thing to the ancient Egyptian religion. And then the priest kicked her out and contacted her family, said, you got to stop coming here. When she was old enough, she married an Egyptian and moved to Egypt. She worked for the Department of Antiquities and was a researcher. And she did that for 60 years. But she helped them uncover places that she had remembered from her past life, gardens and buildings that she remembered from her time as a priestess. She also communicated with the spirit of Seti, the ancient pharaoh. I guess her ghost came to him starting when she was a teenager. She named her son Om Seti. They called her Seti. I'm sorry. They called her her son was Om Seti. But she was a really great case of reincarnation. So I'm kind of working on that one in the background, that and another Antarctica video.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
I like to tell people when it comes to the stuff I talk about on the internet and on my channel specifically, I don't believe in 85% of it. But the 15% of stuff I do believe in is kind of bananas, So when it comes down to stuff like that, I guess for me, the jury's still out. I don't know. I think the Swedenborgian model of the afterlife is kind of interesting. If you're familiar with the Summerland and the work of Emanuel Swedenborg, he founded the New Church. He was also a mystic and a psychic. It's a Christian mysticism, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. The Swedenborgian model, Emanuel Swedenborg.
What's the twist on? Is there still a Jesus in it, or what are they doing with that?
Yeah, there's still a Jesus. It isn't too far off from, I guess, too many Protestant denominations that were founded around the time, Calvinism and other such things. But Swedenborg was a mystic. He was having visions, So his visions are also influential to the faith as well. Their main church is not too far from Philadelphia, where I reside. So growing up, we would drive out to take a look at it. It's a huge cathedral in the middle of freaking nowhere. And it looks like something out of a storybook. It really is. It's something else. Bernathen Cathedral, it's called. And that's the home of the new church in America, founded by Emanuel Swedenborg. And his concept of the afterlife was something called the Summerland. I mean, I guess you just kind of you wake up in the Summerland, and then the people you recognize are there, and then you spend some time there reflecting. And then I don't know if reincarnation comes into it or not, because Swedenborg wasn't really sure either. But it's kind of like one of the layers of heaven. One of the layers of the afterlife, the Summerland. And I think that's a real positive way to look at it, rather than this kind of very strict dogmatic version of heaven and hell,
Interesting.
I also like this, the Zoroastrian model of, like, at least their eschatology, their end time stuff. I do a lot of research on Zoroastrianism. It fascinates me. Zoroaster being the founder of the first monotheistic religion on Earth. It influences every monotheistic religion that comes after it. The Zoroastrians appear in the Bible in really pivotal moments in the history of Scripture. Firstly, during the conquering of Babylon by the Persian king Cyrus and the freeing of the Hebrew people from captivity, and the establishment of the Second Temple, all done under the order of King Cyrus the Great of the Persians, who himself was a Zoroastrian. Later on in the New Testament, we have a story about the Magi, who were the priests of Zoroaster, and they arrive at the Nativity of Christ. So very, very important aspects of the Bible mentioned to us pivotal times when the Zoroastrians are recognized as being kind of akin to the faith.
Interesting.
And I think that's what always captured my imagination. That and Zoroastrianism is just weird. I mean, it's a dying religion because they don't accept converts. It was chased out of its native home of Iran. And then the Parsi went to India and founded a Zoroastrian community there. Zoroastrians only marry Zoroastrians. So it is a faith that's dying out. But I think that there's a lot to it that could really speak to a lot of people in a way they might not find in other religions. And it's a shame that it will no longer be on the face of the earth at some point in history, because they don't really engage in any missionary activities or evangelizations.
That's interesting that they've lasted this long. How much do you think, again, when you hit Sumer and you hit, when you look at these, are you interested in the origins on this? I mean, where are you at with Christian origins?
Well, Christian origins, I think, they are also influenced by Zoroastrianism to a degree. So the whole idea of like angelology and demonology that enters Judaism happens after the release from their captivity in Babylon and comes from Zoroastrianism. So then we really start seeing the books of the Bible talk about celestial beings in a different way.
Yeah, you know, they just found a new Dead Sea Scroll, didn't they?
Yeah, somebody just forwarded me that on Twitter a couple days ago. I have yet to really read into it yet.
Yeah, the Cave of
but
Horrors.
I heard there was some buzz about that.
Yeah, the Cave of Horrors. I guess they found another one. I'm getting an echo. Is that you, Jared?
Nope.
Do we sound
Is it
okay?
me?
Oh. Yeah, no,
Check.
I just heard myself. Hello?
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 So I'm hearing an echo too. Oh boy, guys. This is a first.
Yeah. So I guess I won't talk so much because I'm picking up an echo. But Pete, if you could just hurry up and tell us, because we're running out of time anyway. What is the prophecy of the Magi? Is it Magi?
The prophecy of the Magi. Yeah, the prophecy of the Magi is basically the eschatology of the Zoroastrians. And it has to do with their end times beliefs. So essentially, there are these figures called the Shoyoshant. They're like messiahs. There's 3 of them that come. And each time they come, the forces of evil, which are led by the dark spirit Ungermanyu, become gathered for a great battle. And these forces of evil will take the form of a monster 3 different times. And each time the monster is defeated by the different Shoyoshants. At the end of time, after the final battle against these last monsters, there will be a flood of lava that will encompass the whole of the world. This is after the final raising of the dead. So everybody who's dead is raised up, and then the flood of lava comes. And for the pure of heart, the lava will feel like warm milk. But for those of a sinful nature, the lava will purify them so they can enter into the new heavenly glory of creation. So there's no definitive hell forever in Zoroastrianism the way you find in Christianity.
Yeah. But
what you do find are the duality of a god and a devil. You have Ahura or Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda is their god. He is the wise lord. That is where Mazda, the car company, gets their name from. Ahura Mazda, the god of Zoroastrianism. On top of that, you have archangels. You have different angelic hierarchies. You have a devil figure in the person of Angermanyu. You have a creation story where creation was meant to trap evil. It was a trap for evil because when God created the universe, he knew evil would sneak in and corrupt it. And that mankind is engaged in a spiritual battle against evil, which is undecided until the end of time. Angermanyu is omniscient but not omnipotent, unlike the Christian God, which is both. So the battle is not decided until the end of time. And it is through the good thoughts, good words, and good deeds of humankind that the tides are turned between good and evil.
You know, it kind of sucks that, you know, there's all these gods and we kind of have to pick one and hope that we pick the right one, right?
you know, there's something called the Prisca Theologia. The idea that if you go back far enough in time, the true thread that runs through every religion will lead you back to the purest one. And that's one thing that I like about digging back into the ancient times and these older faiths like Zoroastrianism. Like, what was the religion of Abraham, of before he met God in the desert? You know, I want to know about that faith. I want to know about the early Vedic pantheon that would influence Hinduism and influenced people like Zoroaster. You know, Zoroaster himself saw a world that was corrupt and they were serving gods that didn't seem to care or do anything on behalf of the corruption of the world. And he himself he was a priest of that religion, became disenfranchised and decided to walk away from it and revealed this new faith. when God appeared to him in a river.
That's just so many fascinating stories of old.
Well, yeah. What do you think the oldest one is of what you've encountered? Religion.
Oh, it's got to be. It's Gilgamesh. Nothing's older than Gilgamesh.
I mean, even in the East, even the Hindu Vedas, nothing's older.
Nothing's older than Gilgamesh.
Huh, that's pretty interesting. I'll have to look into that some.
Gilgamesh talks about Utnapishtim, who survived the flood. Like, that's what Gilgamesh, after Enkidu dies and Gilgamesh realizes he's mortal and he can't go on forever, like, he gets really upset by it and he goes on a quest to try to find immortality. So who does he go to see? The guy who survived the Great Flood, Utnapishtim. Noah. How did you survive? Why are you immortal? Well, Utnapishtim explains, we survived the flood. The gods didn't know what to do with us, so they granted us immortality. So Noah and his wife or Utnapishtim and his wife were granted immortality. But he's like, look, it was a one-time thing. He says to Gilgamesh, if you want to conquer death, first conquer sleep. Stay awake for 7 days. So Gilgamesh couldn't do that.
So Noah and his wife were granted immortality by God?
In the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, Noah is Utnapishtim, and he is granted immortality by the Sumerian gods.
Well, then that would mean that he's still alive today.
That would be the case. There are several immortals we talk about throughout history that could be alive today. Longinus, the Count of Saint Germain, this character here that we just spoke of. I mean, these could be, people that still walk the earth.
Oh, wow. I hope I get one of them on the show.
The immortals could exist for all we know.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to talk to one of them. Boy, I want to talk to Noah.
Yeah, well, that Sumerian story about the actual Sumerian story about Noah, he's not the nicest guy. They tell him to get all your ark builders and everybody together and build that ark, and then Noah takes off without him. He wasn't supposed to leave everybody behind, but he did. Not the coolest move in the Sumerian story.
Well, I guess that's going to do it for us. We're about out of time. Pete, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. Hey, everybody, you can check me out at Creepy Little Book on YouTube. I am the master of mysteries and the antiquary of the arcane, where I cover everything from the exoteric to the extraterrestrial, the spiritual to the supernatural, and everything that comes in between. You can find us every night, Monday through Friday at 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, except for the weekends where we get it in a little bit early at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every night is a different and exciting topic, and I hope you'll check us out and join the community.
I hope they check you out too, man. It's a fascinating YouTube channel, and I'm sure we're going to have you on again here in the future, man. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a great time, guys. Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Pete with Creepy Little Book. Jared, what'd you think?
Yeah, that was great. This is somebody who can dig onto these post-flood cultures, mythologies, mythos, all the stuff that connects early Christian work, and then these other ancillary stories that end up now in some dialogues, or definitely between the Ark of Gabriel, the Ark of the Covenant, and then here we are with just so many divergent, yet like he pointed out, what's the right one? And optimistically speaking, when we were talking about faith, you can come full circle. Just start somewhere.
Yeah, the Ark. I've always been fascinated with the Ark of the Covenant. You know what I mean? And to think that there's another one, and to think that there's more than one, is just a totally wild thought, isn't it?
Well, it all goes back to whether or not it's something that was, again, it was a piece of ancient high technology that got deified and got thrown in a box, and then it would be very likely that they would find other pieces of ancient technology. There would just be other pieces.
Yeah,
and
it's like your Blinky board thing. Like, we don't have any idea how to really use this thing. We wouldn't, would we?
No, like the idea of the walls of Jericho, they're bringing the ark around and the walls of Jericho are coming down, sound and frequency. And again, was that even the point? Was that even the purpose? It was, what I find interesting is the ancient megalithic builders are doing things with, of course, large megalithic blocks, and they're cutting, and their technologies and their machineries. They all are possibly really large machines, but with battery or power sources that would be maybe more portable. Like sometimes you see a construction site where there's a 2 or a 4-wheel generator that gets rolled up and left at a site and runs on gas, but this could be plutonium based or something, and it could be the size of what would fit in an ark. And now, here they are having an effect against mud brick walls or stone walls that are heavily mortared, and you got to wonder, it's like, did they just find an old high technology jackhammer, and it's all sound and frequency based? And when they kept going, is it where it is because of that, just random accidental blinky board use?
You know what I think, Jared?
I totally want to know.
I think it's possible that the arks, the many arks, possibly even, obviously there would have to be more than 2. I think they're batteries for the pyramids.
Oh, that's just brilliant. That's absolutely a great possibility, because, you look at those stone boxes and you're like, what was in them? And why is it hard connected to the surface of the pyramid? And what is the total? I mean, if you're using planetary energy, you need large, interconnected, different blocks that ultimately, when they vibrate at low frequencies, they would create enough energy. And here small energy sources might run some of the missing technologies in those constructions. Again, we see the stone, but we don't see what they started with. We don't see what they had for technology that was within the structures. We just assumed that it was repurposed for warhead, like spears, arrowheads, simple hammers. We don't think about, hey, they actually found a full, what should have been a 1,000,000-year battery, and it was down to its ends. And they adapted it in and stuck it in the Ark of the Covenant. And they, there were still some radiation suits, and they decorated them up. And now here we are with, a piece of technology.
I think if somebody gets a hold of one of these arks, they should try to bring it into the pyramid and see what happens.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like having a battery for your car. It's like, how are we? What do they got to do? What do they have to do to get these things to work again? And how is it that they would, reconnect to the system? How much has it been readapted? How much has the pyramid been used in a way that, it's not? Well, anyway, it's very, there's an endless possibility for these old pieces, and to think that there's more than one Ark story, that alone is fascinating. They didn't just like, well, we had an Ark too. It has a distinct enough story that you got to wonder, well, if there's one or two. And I would love to talk to Michael Cremo again about age of antiquity of stories. Like, how old is the written Hindu Vedas? What's the oldest known written story? Not only that, but again, we have millions of cuneiform tablets, and cuneiform B has never been translated. So we have A and B, and we have one whole version of the cuneiform language, truly the most ancient, is untranslated. The cuneiform that we have translated is Syrian, and it was in another king's library, and he had millions of tablets. So we don't even have all those translated, and we have a whole nother language that isn't likely a duplicate. It's likely maybe similar stories, but more, and we don't have our heads around it, let alone Rapa Nui, the Rongo Rongo, or the Harappan. And again, we have the Hindu Vedas. So I'd be very curious. We should follow up one of these days with
Cremo for part 3, huh?
Kind of. I think we really should dig into it with them. And also, we all got online for our live show just shortly, not very long ago, and you started seeing some of those crazy ruins, and those are just
Like you could look at that and go, they took a long time, and okay, so they cut an entire temple not once, not twice, but multiple times out of whole sections of stone. But there are also polygonal, cymatic polygonal blocks.
All right. So let's just wrap up this show. And I want to let everybody know that in April, our open line show, which is normally the last Thursday of every month, is not going to be the 29th of April. I will be traveling. There probably won't be a show that day, or I will have some shows lined up, ready to go, and release that day. But our open line show is going to be on April 22nd, just so everybody knows, at 6:30 Central Standard Time. That's open lines on the 22nd at 6:30 Central. Jared, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
That'll be at notaliens.com. And of course, I will be giving a live lecture May 1st. Go to Not Aliens, look for tickets. You can go virtually to the show, or you can come actually meet me after a 3-hour. We'll be doing a live, not just virtual, but I will actually be at Stonehenge, America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire, May 1st. And then we'll be at the site. And Michael will be there too. We are actually doing conflict from America's Stonehenge. That's coming up, man.
Conflict at the Stonehenge. That's what it's going to be, May 1st. I will be there as well. So hopefully, if anybody's in the area, come on out and say hi. It's always great to meet people that listen to the show. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. Join the members channel for our after shows. Always some neat after shows there to check out. Plus, you also get to help support the channel because, hey, this stuff takes time and it takes money. So, any support we can get is certainly appreciated. Check out our store. Maybe buy a shirt or a hoodie or a sweatshirt or something. It's some pretty cool stuff. You can also find us on Apple iTunes and all of your normal podcast catchers. Until next time, batten down the hatches and be safe.